Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the work session of the Newcastle Town Board of Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. Can I please have a motion to open the work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, well, hello. We are happy today to welcome our illustrious state senator, Peter Harckham, is joining us via Zoom today. And we asked Senator to come today just to say hello, give us an update as to what he anticipates in the 2023 legislative session, and potentially talk to us a little bit about the proposed 2024 budget and anything else that you want to bring up. So with that in mind, I'm going to say welcome and turn it over to you, Senator Harckham.
Well, Madam Supervisor, thank you so very much for the invitation, and honorable board members, Madam Clerk, Madam Administrator. So great to see everybody. Thanks for having us. With me is Victoria Duty, our district director. She'll put her information in the chat. If you ever need anything, of course, please feel free to reach out. Maybe we'll start with the easier and work our way to the more challenging. So just one update. As you know, for 4 years, I chaired the Committee on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse and the Task Force on Opioids Addiction Overdose Prevention. Starting this term, I'll be chairing the Committee on Environmental Conservation. So I'm really excited. As you know, back to my county ledge days, a lot of work in that wheelhouse. Obviously, we've got a lot on our plate. We've got the scoping plan of the CLCPA. We did a 10-hour hearing last Thursday on that. Water quality issues, especially for all of us in the east of Hudson watershed, always loom large. Pesticides, chemicals, waste reduction. We know that's an issue that impacts you at the local level. And so what is our waste policy moving forward? So we're going to have a full docket. We had our first committee meeting today. We've got a really talented group of senators, and it's going to be a nice committee assignment. So I'm excited about that. So we did get the state address and the book that we got. Obviously details are few and far between. We're waiting for the actual budget. The latest it can come is February 1st. So I would suspect, in the next 7-8 days, we will have the budget. And that's where the details are. Some good news there. The governor is keeping all of our commitment to get to 100% of fully funding foundation aid in this year's budget. That is a very positive first step. No new taxes is her commitment. We'll see what the legislature's view on that is, but we're in a tax sensitive district, Westchester, with our property taxes and other taxes are among the highest taxed in the nation. So fiscal responsibility is important. There were some housing issues in the state of the state. And again, it's hard to really fully evaluate until we see the Article 7 language. The governor is proposing a new housing compact. Some of it sounds like a repackaging of some things that have been done in the past. Transit-oriented development has been in the budget ever since I've been in the Senate. So for the last 4 years, and for the last 4 years, it was defeated. I think primarily for a couple of reasons. One, that it primarily just impacts the lower Hudson Valley and Long Island. And two, it's just not practical in many of the communities and which we represent. Many of I'm more bullish than most on housing, but the plan has to work if we're going to implement it, and it certainly didn't work under the former governor. We'll see what the governor is talking about with transit-oriented development. Here, she's talking a lot more about incentives. Are those incentives just for the projects, or are those incentives for other infrastructure needs in a given community. That's an incentive. So, those are calculations that individual municipalities would need to make. We will, of course, be looking at the details of the Article 7 language within the next week when we get the full budget delivered to us. We a lot of the other things they were talking about, incentives, technical assistance on multifamily zoning. All of us lived through that during the housing settlement, and most of our communities passed a model ordinance, working with the monitor and the county board, and we all remember the drama that went along with that. But many of our communities already have multifamily zoning in place. So, when we first saw this proposal, I spoke to the governor's folks, and I told them that, you get north of Mount Kisco, and many of our municipalities don't have infrastructure. You look at what was just done in Katona and Bedford Hills, but by agreement with DEP, that was just for the existing build out that was there. There was no new expansion or build out allowed. You get up into Golden's Bridge and Purdy's and Croton Falls. There is certainly no infrastructure. That's 100-year-old septic system. You get up into Brewster, they're looking to do their own transit-oriented development. You get up to Southeast, the train station is nothing but a train station. There's certainly no infrastructure up there. So, it's really challenging. And then are these going to be are people going to be able to access infrastructure in a meaningful way, or is it, you just have access to the same convoluted process that we've always had, that takes 7, 8, 9 years to get a grant for a particular water project or sewer project, and by that time the costs have gone up immeasurably. So, there's a lot to unpack here. I wish, we had more specifics that I could report to you. We will get the Article 7 language in the next week. She also mentions ADU. I'm not sure what she is talking about in her ADU. I will tell you that I am working with the Westchester County Municipal Officials Association. They now have an ADU committee. After the conversations that we've had last year, we're working very collaboratively. Harvey Epstein and I will be putting in a new bill this year, which will be completely based on incentives, completely voluntary. Things like extra points on a consolidated funding app, perhaps extra severe winter weather repaving money or CHIPS money, those kinds of things. So, we'll see how our proposal differs from hers. One of the things that we also need to look at in her compact, as she talks about, setting certain growth targets, is she coupling these programs together, or are they separate? So, that's the other thing that we need to look at. But, if you're talking about growing your housing production, we do know that some of our communities do have available land, and some of our communities don't have available land. So again, we need to look at the specifics of what the governor is proposing in her plan. We know this has not been a popular proposal. The last 4 years it was proposed, and that's why it was defeated. So, we really need to see how enticing the enticements are, or is it more of the same that is kind of repackaged. So, that's kind of just a very, very brief overview of some of the things in the state of the state, and a couple of the things that I'm working on, and really happy to field questions from board members.
So I understand that the legislation hasn't come out yet, but also I would hope, given that you're now chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee, I would hope that you would also look at, even if there are lands available, like for instance, we have parkland. I would hate to have to give up parkland in order to increase our housing stock by 3%.
Oh,
Because
yeah, and that could never happen, because in order to do that, you'd have to alienate other lands, you'd have to come to the legislature for that. So I remember when the housing settlement first was entered into, some years ago, and the monitor was driving around with one of the supervisors, and he was saying, well, look at all this land, look at all that land. And they had to inform them that it was parkland. And so, parkland could not be alienated for housing. So at least that's one protection we have. Certainly the amount of wetlands that we have is another.
Right. I mean, I guess she could legislate differently, but we'll have to see when it comes in. But certainly, I wouldn't want to have to be cutting down significant amount of trees. I want to make sure that we are protecting our environment, as well as, looking to increase housing stock. I think is laudable and something we want to do. But we really need to understand that. How does that need to be done? Do we get credit for anything? The 60 plus units that we've done of housing in the past couple of years, and additional housing, do our townhomes that are already approved, the 91 townhomes that we're looking to build at Chappaqua Crossing, do those factor into it, or are we including those in our baseline numbers?
Right.
So,
those are great questions, because you have things in the pipeline, and that's exactly what she's trying to get at. So if you've got things in the pipeline, you should get credit for those.
right. So I guess we need to understand all of that. And so where are you going to just reserve judgment? Where are you? What are your thoughts in regard to the TOD legislation? And I would hope that you would advocate. I would much rather see, your ADU bill, and see what that has to say, because I know you've been working with WMOA, and I know you've been diligently listening to municipalities and really starting from the bottom up, which I think is the way this legislation should happen, instead of kind of a top-down mandate. So I really appreciate everything you've done, and I would hope you would advocate that she should take her ADU legislation, whatever that may be, out, and give yours the opportunity to pass through legislative channels.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. We'll see what she does. There's obviously a give and take in the budget, and we could negotiate taking hers out, putting ours in. Again, I am not in past years, I've not been supportive of TOD, just because it simply hasn't been actionable or practical. And a lot of the conditions that we have that make it challenging through mandate, you can't mandate something be built when DEP has put severe restrictions on the amount of wastewater treatment plants in the watershed. That's just a fact of the watershed agreement that was signed, what was it, 25 years ago, that there'd be no new wastewater treatment plants in the watershed. So, it makes it that much more challenging, if not impossible, to create large scale housing if we can't create more wastewater treatment. So there are a lot of systemic obstacles. I like the idea of incentives. I like the idea of goals as opposed to mandates. Those of you who are old enough to remember back to Andy Spano's Housing Opportunities Commission put out a housing opportunities report that just had regional goals by municipality, and they were just goals. There were no mandates, and there was a lot of blowback to that. So I think we really need to work collaboratively with our municipalities. I just don't know if they're aware of some of the challenges that we face, particularly here in the watershed. And so, that's my job, is to educate them on that stuff. I've already had conversations with them on some of the watershed issues. And if we need to push, we push. And if we need to educate, we educate.
Right. And I would just say, I know you mentioned like areas north of Mount Kisco have infrastructure issues. We're south of Mount Kisco, and I would argue that we have significant infrastructure issues as well in terms of significant wetlands. We have failing septic systems in many areas of our municipality. We're predominantly a septic system municipality as well. So I would argue that we have those issues, even though we are not north of Mount Kisco. We are directly south.
Yep, got it.
Any
Got
other
it.
questions on this issue? Then I do have one other. Anything?
Yeah, I just want to mention, well, first of all, thank you, Senator Harckham, for taking the time to be here during your
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
busy budget season. I just wanted to say that I do think that the governor's housing compact raises a lot of serious issues. And I think that you hit it right on the nail when you said it has to be workable. And our communities, as you know, are very unique. And I think that the incentives are useful only if there are no structural issues that are getting in the way, such as our infrastructure issues, which Lisa just described regarding our septic systems with capacity issues or lack of sewers, and the fact that we do have a lot of wetlands. And we also have a water treatment plant that has capacity issues. I know that in the summer,
Yep.
it reaches its limits, and we have, as you know our town, we have very narrow streets. So every community is unique, and I think that the goals are understandable, but the workability and what every community can accomplish would be something very important for the governor to understand. And I'm not so sure that the budget process gives anyone the time to go over what each community can really do. So I just wonder if there's an opportunity at this point to put it back into the legislative process.
Well,
It may already be too late for that, but
well,
yeah,
the thing is, you
very
raise an
helpful.
interesting point. When there are fiscal implications, and she's talking about money as an incentive, then it has to be done in the budget. If it's strictly policy, so people were wondering last time why ADU was in the budget, is because at the time she was tying it to $85 million in the budget for to assist people to convert illegal to legal and make them safe. So there was a budgetary component. If we're just talking about pure ADU without a fiscal implication, we can easily do that out of the budget. I think what her housing compact is talking about is having a fiscal incentive, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's repaving money, whatever it is that she will announce are the incentives. Therefore, it would need to be done in the context of the budget. But you're right. Governors have historically tried to cram the budget full of their prerogatives, and it leaves a very short amount of time for analysis. And that's why certain items are pulled out and done legislatively later in the session.
To Vicky's point, I would say that the $250 million that's proposed as incentives for and money for infrastructure to allow municipalities to upgrade infrastructure for TOD is not even remotely sufficient to warrant it being in the budget. It should be taken out. I mean, $250 million over all these municipalities to deal with infrastructure issues that would result from this is a very small amount of money. So I would argue that that is not enough to be included in the budget, so it should be taken out and go through the regular legislative process.
Yeah, it could, and those will be the discussions that we have, and that's why I raised the question early on. Is the inducement just to give a municipality a couple $1 million to do that particular project, build a small package plan? Or is the inducement, hey, I know you've got an old water treatment plant on the other side of town, and you'd really like to sewer the other side of town. We'll give you the money to do those projects if you agree to do something on the other side of town. That to me is much more of an inducement than just saying we'll give you the the infrastructure money to do something that you may not want to do. That's not an inducement.
Mm-hmm. Right, and for instance, to get sewers in Millwood, right, it's going to be $60 million, I think. So
Right, right.
coming out
Now,
of that 250, and we're just one small municipality.
right. So, you know, and then that's an internal calculation that, you know, if someone wants to cut you a check for $50 million to put sewers on that side of town, you know, then it's your internal calculation with your planning department. All right, well, can we, you know, is it worth it for us to push 3% of development to get that inducement? $50 million is a pretty big inducement, you know, is $1.2 million for a package plant, an inducement, you know, maybe not.
Right. So, okay, so changing just topics for a second. When do you think we will have more clarity around what types of grants we can apply for under the Environmental Bond Act?
You know, I spoke to the commissioner today. They are working on getting draft rules together that would need to go out for public comment. So they're not there yet, but they will have something out for public comment soon. We know what the buckets are going to be, but as far as what it is that folks can apply for, we're not quite there yet. But I will, as soon as I hear something, I'll let you know.
Perfect. All right.
I do want to add something, though, going back to the housing compact and transit-oriented development. And you mentioned Brewster, and I know that they're making a big effort there to have TOD developments. And I do know that there are communities, or at least a community there, that's being displaced. So I know that there are going to be unintended consequences that are quite negative, which these legislative efforts try to improve upon. So it's a bit of an irony, and I just wonder if there's any thought given to these kinds of consequences.
Oh, absolutely. You know, that's a local project that's not being driven either by the governor or by the state legislature. You know, and that's one of the reasons why DEC in their new approval process for certain permits looks at cumulative impacts, you know, is a community, an environmental justice community, for instance, being overburdened with additional burdens. In this case, you're right. You know, displacing a vibrant immigrant community, and those are all the kind of things that we need to look at holistically when making these decisions.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, so I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with you once the legislation comes out and we all have a chance to quickly digest it.
Yeah, I mean, put your coffee pot on. We're not going to have a lot of time because this budget is coming a couple weeks later than is normal. There's a custom that when a governor wins their first election, they're allowed to submit the budget 2 weeks later. So seeing, you know, she stepped into office, but this was her first, you know, natural election. So she's entitled to that 2-week grace period. So normally we'd get it around mid-month, and now we're getting it at the end of the month, no later than February 1st. So it's no doubt going to be a truncated budget process, and you know, we'll dive in and we'll stay in close contact.
All right. Thank you. And you know, to the extent you hear of other grant monies that are available to us, we'd love to be informed because we've got plenty of things to spend money on.
All right, you know, we can arrange a Zoom offline. We'll get your list of priorities. And then, you know, sometimes it's easier for us to like hear your priorities and then for us to go look for the money, as opposed to, you know, us just sending you kind of red herrings that may or may not be helpful.
Perfect. I'll make sure we schedule that.
All right, terrific. Terrific.
All right. Well,
Thank
you,
you, everybody. Terrific to see everyone.
You too. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you coming.
Thank you, Senator.
All right. Thanks so much.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, that was great. I'm looking forward to hearing more from him as we get that information. Ed, well, can we hold off on these administrative items? Just give it.
I thought that was.
Is everyone
the plan.
here?
We could just go right
I only see one member of the planning board though so far.
to the Lone Ranger so far.
Although I think Tom might have been here yet.
Somebody else.
All right. Well,
Administrative
why don't we
items
go
are-
through them quickly?
It's only if you guys have any questions on them.
Any questions, anyone?
We've got a payment of claims, authorization to approve partners in safety agreement. That's our pre-employment physicals, our drug and alcohol testing in case of accidents or randomly. Next is our CSCA employment benefit agreement. The town pays for vision and dental for CSCA members and management as well. The police are looking to approve their annual installment contract for the voice recording system. It's just shy of $10,000. So although it's included in the budget and it's a longstanding contract, we just bring it to your attention because it is one of the larger expenditures and I want the board to be aware of it. Next is the return of a street opening permit bond where work has been satisfactorily completed. And that's all we've got for our admin items.
All right.
Just looking
Any
at the wrong
questions?
No.
Okay, thank you, Jill. So Ed, just a point of order. Do we need to close the work session and open the joint meeting, or it's part of our work session?
It's really part of the work session, but
Okay.
you may want to open the joint work session by motion.
All right. So can we close the solo work session? Can I have a motion to do that?
Motion to close the
Work
work session. And second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we're gonna take a short break while we move over to the table here and convene with our planning board members, and we will be back to everyone shortly.